Happy New Comic Day, everybody, and welcome to the debut episode of Wednesday Comics Show with Gino. Still kind of settling down on the topic or the title, so you'll see that when this gets uploaded. But it's kind of a sort of reworking and revamping of a series that I used to have on New Comic Day. It was called my New Comic Day Blast, which was a mix of recommendations, some comic book news, and occasionally a New Comic Day haul, depending on when I recorded and if I had to shop that day. So I never was kind of settled on how that was going and what I wanted to do with it, but I always wanted something to have I wanted to have a show for New Comic Day and kind of talk about some new books as well as another topic or something related to the world of comics. So that's why I'm bringing Wednesday Comics, the Wednesday Comic Show, whatever I want to call it, and going to drop some recommendations and then touch on a different topic. So that's what this new series is going to be about. Some recommendations and a different topic relating to any aspects of being a comic fan, as far as either reader, collector, or like selling, flipping, reselling, whatever you want to call it. And that's actually where we're going to start today, or the topic of this debut episode is going to delve into those a little bit. But first, we got some recommendations because we got a couple cool books out today. And one thing I did with New Comic Day Blast was, especially when there was a lot of books out, trying to figure out, okay, how many am I going to talk about? Do I want to do several of them and just keep it quick, or do a couple more or do like just a couple and I don't know, either go into longer or what, but I don't know. So today I just picked two titles and we're going to start over with Moon Knight #1. Our man Mark Spector is back. Several covers out today by fantastic artists from all around, and you kind of see all of those here. But premise is, I am Moon Knight. The mysterious Mr. Knight has opened his midnight mission. His people petitioning for protection from the weird and horrible. The Moon Knight stalks the rooftops and alleys marked with his crescent moon tag, bringing violence to any who would harm his people. Mark Spector, in whichever guise he dons, is back on the streets, a renegade priest of an unworthy god. While Khonshu languishes in a prison that Moon Knight put him in, Moon Knight must still observe his duty, protecting those who travel at night. Let it be known, Moon Knight will keep the faith. Got Jed McKay, Alessandro Capuccio bringing it for, yes, Moon Knight is just dope. Ahead of his, Disney Plus series. I don't even know when that's dropping, but it's just cool to see Moon Knight back with a solo title again. He's had several throughout the years, especially even just this past decade. He's had a couple shorter series and just kind of get relaunched a year or two apart. But he's back. We'll see what's going on with this. I'm sure it's planned to be some kind of ongoing. It could top out at 12, which seems to be the magic number for a lot of series. Like, hey, just do a year and then that's it. So, but hopefully this one sticks around. Just good to see Moon Knight. Obviously, if you read Avengers, he's been active there. You had the Moon Knight Annual from last year, which had, I think I picked up all three of those covers. They were just cool. It was kind of bringing back the Acts of Vengeance theme throughout a bunch of the Marvel annuals. So that was cool. But yeah, so Moon Knight bringing back. I want to see it. I ordered two of these copies, two of the covers, Zafino and Laraz variant, because Laraz is just a champ. He was doing great stuff on X-Men titles recently. So always down to see any more of Pepe Larraz's work. And then we jump over to Boom Studios because we got Dark Blood #1, a new series. I got this one pre-ordered as well just because premise sounded cool. And we got Latoya Morgan, Walt Barna, and Valentine Delandro doing the standard cover for this one. What if you were given the power to change the course of history? Alabama, 1955. Avery Aldridge is an ordinary young black man, a decorated World War II veteran. Avery provides for his wife and daughter, but wounds of the past have a way of coming back, and Avery Aldridge will soon discover he is anything but ordinary. After a run-in awakens strange new abilities, Avery is about to become more powerful than he could have ever dared to dream, in a country and society that never wanted him to have any power. A bold, evocative, genre-bending saga by screenwriter Latoya Morgan, AMC's Walking Dead, Into the Badlands, and rising star artist Walt Barna. The Osiris Path. Perfect for fans of Department of Truth and Bitter Root. So, new indie series. I always like pointing out new indie series just because they just don't always get the same amount of publication. A lot of times, maybe for the first issue, but depending on the publisher and maybe the genre of the book, it kind of varies. But this one just sounds kind of cool, so I was like, you know what, I got this pre-ordered and looking forward to checking this out when it arrives. And so yeah, that's just a couple titles for New Comic Book Day, July 21st, 2021. Now let's get into the subject, and I kind of touched on in the beginning when I talked about reader, collector, and reseller. Now even just reseller, you could say just seller period, or flipper, or either reseller, either kind of one of those. And now I kind of label those as pass into being a comic fan, not even just collector, obviously, but you can. And I originally had this analogy for kind of like a 3-lane highway, and could be in your lane and go into a different lane, but then it didn't really kind of work. It was like, you know what, that's actually pretty terrible, because you can be in, as far as those paths, you can be in any of those, you can be in a couple of those lanes at the same time, and if you do it on the highway, that's bad, and somebody's going to get hurt. So, reader, you have different paths. Like, hey, you want to be a reader, you could go all digital, you could pick up physical copies, or you could wait for trade. Any of those, you have a lot of options. And if you're not worried about the collecting aspect or the value, and if you have a space issue, digital is a fantastic way to go. You have access to a lot of every title, like same day and date. And if you're into like the histories of Marvel and DC, Marvel Unlimited and DC Universe apps provide a wealth of stories for you to check out, and fantastic deals. And I don't know about DC, but I know Marvel even shortened the time that new releases get added to the app. I think it's down to 3 months now, give or take. I think whereas previously 6. I remember reporting the news on this some time ago, but that is fantastic if you're into that and like you can't keep up with new releases, or even just those two apps right there, Marvel Limited and DC Universe. If you're worried about like, hey, you know what, I can't pick up all these new releases every single week, can't afford that, like this is a great way you can read backstories and catch up on them later on. If you're not worried about catching them the day they release and reading the stories, like that's perfectly fine. I've been behind in reading for a long time, so I'm all over the place with that. So again, you can have that, and if you, again, not worried about the collecting, you can pick up newer issues or back issues and trades. Like trade waiting is a path that a lot of people do, because you can pick up the trades, the collected editions, which, I mean, depending on the series, if it's a mini series, obviously it'll likely have all those issues in there. 3, 4, 5 issues will all be contained in there. But once you start to get to 6 issues, it'll probably split up. So like longer series, if like especially for ongoing series, you're talking 4, 5, 6 issues, give or take. And then obviously you got other larger collector editions, hardcovers, and compendiums, and omnibus. You got those as well. And then with trades specifically, you're catching like value per issue, like I said, at discounted rates most of the time, depending on what they are. I know a lot of introductory ones for image books are a lot of times, I won't say all the time, but a lot of times that I've seen tend to usually come in around $10, which is fantastic. You pick up the first 5, 6 issues of a new series for $10 is just a fantastic deal. It's a great bargain. And at some point we'll probably talk about like where to find comics and finding deals. I've talked about that in some aspects, especially with eBay, but just specifically with all the entire realm of comics. We can get into that later on if anybody's interested. And then kind of jump into collecting. Now, collecting, similar to reading, obviously you can, like, you pick up those issues. Now collecting, this is all about the physical aspect of it. Like, hey, you know what, I need these books. But then you could also split up collecting with trades or single issues. Now, you've all seen my bookshelf tour. I do both single issues, collected editions. I like both. I love looking at my bookshelf. Like, this is great visual. Showed it off on Instagram as well. And I dropped that bookshelf tour up. It was updated bookshelf tour early in the year. I don't even remember. Was it earlier this year? Yeah, I think so. And just kind of showing off all those. And I've since then have added to it. So there's a lot of options there for collecting. But now with the way the collector's market is right now, we're talking about back issues. And with COVID, and we've already talked about this a lot, and everybody has from, especially on YouTube and just the collector's industries, comics, trading cards, and who even knows what else. just a lot of people and maybe just not being able to get out and just kind of rekindling their interest in different hobbies and having money to burn, kind of basically just sitting around. So you're not going out and kind of racking up the usual expenses. So hey, you know what? Let me go dig into comics. And then you have people who are looking at the value of comics, which we're going to get into in the final tier, I guess. Not tier because I don't want it to be like leveled, but just the final segment of this with the reselling aspect. But this is when you're a collector, like you got a lot of things to consider, like the different sources, where you're finding books, and that's part of the hunt as well, which is something I think most comic book collectors just enjoy, hunting just for the sake of hunting, digging through boxes at different shops, conventions, flea markets, estate sales, garage sales, wherever else, and then like finding the best deals you can. Obviously eBay as well, and online, all the online aspect, eBay, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and there's several other different apps. Like Let Go, is that still one? There was two of those like that, but I think they merged. And then I guess there's another one that's new. I think it was like, what is it? Whatnot or something like that. And then Shortbox, I think, is another one. So even just digitally, you have access to several different avenues to like just acquire comics. So collecting, now not all collectors are readers, and obviously not all readers are collecting, as I talked about with the digital aspect. But with collectors, sometimes it's just about, hey, you know what, maybe there's something from their childhood and you just kind of still associate, or you just still kind of connected to them, but you don't care so much about the stories, and you're just like, hey, you know, this cool art, or you interested in collecting something like stories and books from particular creators or characters, like, hey, you know, I like this writer, or I like this artist, and on their work on these series, or I like this character. You might be an Amazing Spider-Man collector, so you're going back to, or trying to get Amazing Fantasy 15 all the way up through the current stuff, and then all the other series out there, DC, and then we get into mainstream and indie comics as well another time, because that's a separate thing right there. There's no debate. It's not a fight. It's not like mainstream versus indie. You can enjoy it all. I do. If you've seen any of my comic hauls ever, there's always a healthy mix of mainstream and indie comics. So it's just a great world for both. So collecting, again, just there's wide range of stuff out there and different avenues to access books and different considerations as well, especially if you're into more books, because you have, if something like right now with the comic market, if you're looking at certain series and if they're hot, like, hey, you know what, I'm going to step back from that. I'm going to let those cool down and I'll wait and I'll go back to those. But then you can focus on another area, and then like you can check back in. That's what I do. I have a lot of series that I'm after, as far as like my main top series that I'm interested in. And when they started getting hot, I'm like, you know what, I'll step back and I can focus on some of these other titles and fill in those runs that I've been working on for years. Like, hey, I can get back to some other runs because they're not as crazy popular right now, so I can try to find better deals for those. And then you have like the raw aspect versus graded comics. I haven't delved into graded comics at all. CGC, CBCS, what's the other one? Is it EGX or PGX? What am I thinking of? I think it's EGX. But I haven't delved into that at all, but that's a big thing within the comic book community, especially you see that a lot on YouTube and Instagram. A lot of, and there's obviously they have their own, CGC has their own forum, so there's a whole like separate, not separate, but just a whole nother like sect of the community, like concentrated on that area as well. So you have lots of options. You're never, the only thing that can limit you is yourself and whatever you're after. Like that's it. Like it's just a wide open world as far as collecting goes. Then we get into reselling, and similar to the other two, yes, it's wide open. You have lots of options, lots of avenues as far as approaching this, and you can be a collector and a reader and still sell on the side. I myself, I maintain all three. I've been a reader. I read a ton of comics. Again, I've talked about my erratic reading, newer issues, older issues. I collect a lot of stuff. I collect variants, and sometimes I will collect multiples of books because of certain artists, especially Chris Bachalo, one of my favorite artists. I'll like have one book, I have a few books from Amazing Spider-Man 555 and his X-Men 200 variant with Tim Townsend and who else was on that one? I forgot the other creator I was involved in that. But then Humberto Ramos was on that as well. I have multiples of those, both of those signed, and I have those framed. So I get multiple copies of certain books because I want to frame. I talked about framing comics and kind of setting up my comic room a little bit and kind of designing that. And eventually you'll see some of that when I kind of get that ready. But I want to like framed, and I talk about that. And even in my last haul video from mycomicshop.com, picked up a couple extra issues because this is going back to collecting. Realize I just went on a complete tangent, but as a collector, like picking up the extra issues to frame because I want to have. I'll only frame something that I have a duplicate of, so I can have one copy that's just chill and just like store it away, and I don't worry about it. But one, like I want an extra one to sit up on the wall and frame. So that's kind of my approach to that as well. Anyway, now back to reselling. There are myriad of reasons why you want to, even, and I'm talking specifically like a retailer, but I mean just an individual, you as a person, like selling comic books on the side. Again, different reasons. You might have extras. You're trying to get rid of your extras. You are trying to help fund the hobby, help the hobby fund itself. So what that means is like using the hobby, like you're into comics. Okay, so how can you use this to help yourself buy other comics? So there's less personal funds. You bring in money in to help specifically like selling other comics or like toys, video games, whatever else. But in this case, comics, to purchase other comics. Either like, hey, you know what? I'm going to get rid of a bunch of comics to fund this bigger purchase, like this big key book you want. Like, hey, you know what? I'm going to get rid of all these other runs. They're cool at the time, but I'm good with letting them go. And I can use that to like help fund this giant size X-Men #1, my personal grail. And I did that. An example would be that was last year. I sold a run of comics, Thor God of Thunder. Like I read it at the time. I had all like the full run. And it was cool at the time. There was some cool moments in there as well. But I was okay with letting it go because I was trying to fund a bigger purchase, which was the Marvel HasLab Sentinel, which will be shipping, I think, probably a month or so away from that, which is wild that was a year ago. But that's just an example. Like, all right, you know what? I used that and I didn't have to come out of my pocket for anything else. I had something right there that paid entirely for that. Like that was perfect, and it was perfect timing as well. So I was able to do that. And there are like plenty of other like options for that. That was just one personal example. But another option is, or another reason you might be selling is, hey, you know what? You might not have the space. And luckily for myself, I don't have to worry about that. But I know plenty of people out there like, hey, you know what? I got all these issues stacked up, like decades of reading and collecting. Like those issues, like if you're into short boxes and long boxes, those can stack up, and that space fills up fast. So you might be looking at a room, and you might have 30 short boxes, 30 long boxes, whatever, I don't know. And you're like, you know what? I need to get rid of this stuff. So, and kind of going back to when I mentioned with the reading and collecting, all the different avenues to get rid of stuff. So not only different avenues as far as how you can participate in it, but getting rid of stuff as well. And eBay, conventions, all of those different apps, especially Instagram is huge for selling stuff now. And just the IG comic community like is vast, so you can definitely get involved with that. Different Facebook groups, even Facebook Marketplace. I've bought met up with someone and bought a little run of West Coast Avengers comics that I wanted at a great price, and like that was just perfect for me. Like he wanted to get rid of some books, and I wanted to buy those books. He got money in exchange. Perfect deal. Everybody wins. So plenty of different avenues out there and different considerations for what you're looking for. As far as now with eBay is probably the biggest. It's the most well known, and you're going to get the most eyes on your items. But then you have to also factor in the fees that are associated with that, seller fees. And depending on your volume, it kind of makes up for it. Like, you know, you can take that hit because you're doing it in volume. If you're selling cheaper items, it may not. You kind of have to look at the pros and cons of each, whatever you're selling. You might make up for it for like cheaper items with some of your bigger sets or bigger key books, whatever. And like Instagram and YouTube and all of those other things, you can kind of get around the fees if you use PayPal. But then you also have to be careful and a lot of people have gotten in trouble with kind of abusing. I'll use that lightly because but that's kind of what it is basically. The friends and family option were like, hey, you know what? And there have probably been some members of the community who themselves have gotten in trouble, and PayPal has been known to kind of freeze accounts and freeze your money. So whatever money you have locked up in your account or stored in your account could be locked up for some time if there's an issue. If they kind of look at, all right, this person is getting in a bunch of money from all these different other accounts, different emails, different names, and like different like amounts, like like stretching in range or whatever, reaching in range. Like, hey, you know what? They're going to look at that. But then with the goods and services, offers the protection for buyers and sellers, and like that's probably the best way to go. But then the price of that is the fee. So there is a cost to play. So you're going to encounter a fee taking in the money. So you have to, again, pros and cons to everything. So that's just some considerations for if you're into this for reselling. And when I mentioned how not all readers are collectors and all collectors are readers, not all resellers are readers as well. Sometimes they're, especially with how talked about with COVID and everything, like the comic market booming, a lot of people saw that as an opportunity to jump in and get into flipping and just that whole market right there. Like, all right, you know what, I can come up on these books, or maybe they have old books and they're just out of the game as far as collecting and reading, but just a way like, all right, I can get into this and see some money. And a lot of people just look on the outside and like, oh, you know what, there's money. And we've all seen this with when we hear those mainstream news stories. Oh, Action Comics #1, Detective Comics 27, like they're hitting all these record numbers. Amazing Fantasy #15, and they're hitting these $1 million sales. Those numbers can attract a lot of people, and people see that. And we kind of saw that with like after those kind of hit, and everybody's talking about their old comics. Oh, I got old comics. They got to be worth something, right? And then they're pulling out direct from the 90s. Like nobody's gonna pay $1,000 for your 90s Valiant books or any of your Image books. Like some of them were cool at the time, and some of them still are. I still love Spawn, but obviously that was a different era, and just times have changed. Like, and nobody's gonna pay those. Like, just because you have an older book doesn't mean it's worth money. Like, I have to stress that. So be careful when you just hear vintage or older. For that means different things to a lot of people, and so you just have to be careful if you're going into it for that. And not every, like, obviously not every older book has value. Even some things, modern books, you have to be careful because everybody's thinking every like hot variant, like, yeah, everybody was kind of going to it with the 90s and variant covers and all this cool stuff, foils and embossed covers, and they were cool and thinking they were going to be worth something, and they end up being worthless at a certain point. Modern books now, like ratio variants, might hold their value for a little bit, but all these store exclusives that you're finding from different retailers, and then I watch a lot of mystery box videos, mystery box unboxings, and filled with a lot of story variants. Like, those things do not hold their value because they're like, you see a lot of those like $30-$40 books. Those are not gonna, like, they're just inflated values that, and nobody's buying them. That's why you see them in mystery boxes, because you throw on a $40 tag doesn't mean is it really worth $40 though. Like, some people might buy them. I'm just amazed that that's still like the way it is. And I've talked about mystery boxes a little bit. I haven't delved into them. I think they're kind of cool to an extent. And I like watching some of the unboxings just to see what kind of books people are getting, like pulling out of them. But like a lot of those store exclusive books, they're not going to hold their value. So you just have to be mindful of that if you're going into it and thinking you're going to hoard those and sell them for, no. And like slabbing, kind of going back to that, like, you don't have to slab everything. Like, every like slab book, modern book, is worth anything. I know if you follow City Limits Comics on Instagram, he just dropped a video recently, a little clip on IGTV about that as well. Like, everybody just slabbing modern books. Like, why? Like just for the hell of it, everybody's like, yeah, 9.8 is cool, but like every damn book that comes out, like, what? I mean, if you want to encapsulate some stuff, that's up to you. Like, hey, you like collect how you want to, but as far as reselling, like, those just aren't gonna be. They're not gonna hold their value a lot of time. There are few modern keys that are like top tier and that will either hold their value or increase in value as time goes on. Ultimate Fallout number 4, First Appearance Miles Morales, that is one. That's probably going to be the key example of at least something from the last like 10, 15, 20 years that people are going to kind of latch onto, because he's just absolutely hit. He's a dope character. And then the Spider-Verse movie, which was a hit for younger people and like older comic collectors and just comic fans of all age, superhero fans. Like, that was just a big hit. So that book is definitely going to probably even increase, and then probably see the MCU at some point. That's all speculation talk that other people will get into on YouTube. But if you want to get into reselling, there's just even more considerations. I mean, it's obviously a great place, especially if you know your stuff, and if you are a reader and collector, and you want to do some reselling on the side as well, or even do it like go into a big, you have even more knowledge of everything, and you have, oh my God, ESPN. I forgot to have my ringer up. That completely threw my train of thought off. But again, just plenty of options out there, reader, collector, or reseller. And I just wanted to kind of highlight those and kind of delve into each of those. If you're new to comics, or even if you are a seasoned collector and you're thinking of getting into one of the other avenues, like, hey, you know what, I've been reading for so long, I have a lot of comics, and you know what, I need to start reselling some of these. So hey, you can go into that as well. You're a collector and you just like it, but hey, you know what, let me start reading some of this stuff. Go ahead, start reading stuff. And if you want to, one thing I know for some collectors, they just like collecting this stuff, but they'll read the digital versions of it. Either if you get Marvel Comics and you get the digital copy, or if you didn't want to touch it, people will buy physical copies to the store and collect and keep safe, but then they'll read the digital versions or wait for the trade and read the actual trade. Sometimes I will, there are several stories, Civil War, Marvel Civil War, the first one, I have those single issues, and I've reread those several times. And I want to get the trade at some point because I've reread it and I want to keep pulling out those issues. And I have all of them signed as well. X-Men Fatal Attractions, my favorite story. I just showed this off, the trade, a couple weeks ago. I was able to finally pick up that trade. I just reread the story earlier this year. So I was like, you know what, I don't want to keep pulling out all these issues whenever I want to read this. And I have the trade finally, which was cool. X-Men Milestones, it's a yellow book, and they kind of re-released all some of these major X-Men crossovers and storylines, all in the kind of same theme, X-Men Milestones and different Phalanx Covenant, Fatal Attractions, Inferno. Oh my God, think about all these different stories. Age of Apocalypse has been released several times, I think, and just all these different X-overs. So now I have it all in one set, and it even includes other issues outside of those main 6 issues that everybody kind of connects to Fatal Attractions. But again, you have all those, any of those, reader, collector, reseller. You can go into any of those. You can be 1, 2, 3. You can fall into any of those, and even if you're into a single area of those, you have lots of options. That's what's great. You have plenty of ways to enjoy comics, be a comics fan, and just enjoy the medium and different aspects of this hobby. So yeah, plenty of ways out there. So that's what I got for you for Wednesday Comic Show, and probably looking at, we'll see how this goes and maybe kind of tweak it and add different things, and we'll see how it goes for the future. So let me know what you thought of this debut episode. Share all your thoughts in the comments below, or whatever you picked up for today, what you're looking forward to reading this week or picking up. Share all of that in the comments below. Happy reading, happy hunting, happy collecting. This is GENOTHADRAGON. Thanks for watching, and peace out.